Today's goal is 100 berries. Smash that like button to get that juicy fruit and hit subscribe for more amazing recaps. Now let's get into it. The city wasn't just damaged, it was annihilated. What was once bustling life and towering buildings is now dust, rubble, and silence. All thanks to the clash between Gongyu and that twisted villain, Huang. Despite his body battered and bruised, Huang's face is twisted in a sick grin, his laugh cutting through the ruin. Our hero, Gongyu, has him pinned to the ground, hands locked around his throat. Yet Huang only sneers, his gaze slipping over his shoulder like he knows something Gongyu doesn't. And then Gongyu's gaze follows. His heart stops. His friends, his comrades who'd stood beside him through every battle are scattered across the ground like broken toys, limbs twisted, bodies motionless. The sight sears into him, and tears flow, unbidden, down his face. His spirit is breaking, but his principles hold strong. No matter the rage, the sorrow, the sheer devastation in his heart, Gongyu won't cross that line. He won't become the monster. Instead, he releases Huang to the law, hoping, praying that justice will be enough for the ones he's lost. But deep inside, a part of him is already cracking, whispering that he'll regret this decision. The news of Huang's capture spreads like wildfire. Headlines scream that the world's worst villain has finally been locked away, stripped of his power with a high-tech suppressor and imprisoned in the deepest cell of Ruuls prison. But for Gongyu, watching the reports, seeing the tributes to his friends, there's no relief, only hollow, aching loss. He's sinking deeper when a hand reaches out and clicks off the screen. He looks up to find his brother, Inspector Gangozio, standing there. Gangozio works at Ruuls, one of the few tasked with keeping monsters like Huang locked away. He gives Gongyu a soft reminder not to let this destroy him. Gongyu, feeling the burn of loss and anger, admits that he wishes he'd just ended it himself. But his brother pulls him back, reminding him of their promise, the hero's code they'd sworn to uphold. They're not killers, they're protectors. Justice isn't about vengeance, no matter how much blood was spilled. They're better than that, and Gongyu has to hold on to that, for his friend's sake. Gongyu fights the doubts twisting inside him, listening as his brother promises that Huang's execution is set for next week, and that he'll be there to oversee it. For now, they join together to honor their fallen comrades, standing amidst roses and tears. Outside, a crowd seethes, demanding Huang's death, a firestorm of anger and grief. Days pass, heavy with dread, and then the day arrives. But instead of the justice Gongyu had clung to, he's met with his worst nightmare. Huang survives, while his brother, his only remaining family, is dead, lost to the chaos. Days later, Gongyu sits alone before his brother's memorial, drowning in guilt and grief. He's barely aware of his surroundings when a voice slices through the fog. He looks up to see the iron-willed warden of Ruuls, Si Yunzhou, flanked by her entourage. She's got something for him, a video tablet with footage of his brother's final encounter with Huang. Without a word, she hits play, and Gongyu watches, his hands clenched into shaking fists. In the video, Huang is being led toward his execution, but he's not going quietly. He sneers at Gangozio, calling his name, mocking him with questions, needling him for every perceived weakness. And then, he twists the knife deeper, talking about the thrill he gets from taking lives, daring Gangozio to admit he feels it too. Finally, Gangozio, pushed to his limit, snaps, whispering, "What do you mean by having fun?" And in that moment, the trap is set. Huang's got him exactly where he wanted, savoring one last, twisted victory over Gongyu's shattered world. The white-haired psycho's grin widens, and he casually mentions how he gets a thrill from the slightest touch of his finger, making heads pop, like fragile bubbles. Gang Ho meets his gaze, unflinching, and says he doesn't share that excitement. In fact, every time he executes someone, guilt eats at him, even though all he does is press a button to carry out justice on scumbags like Huang. He talks about the nightmares that haunt him, faces of the villains he's condemned, their voices taunting him, asking if he's become one of them, haunting his sleep. Huang raises an eyebrow, amused, and asks why Gang Ho even sticks around if it torments him so much. Gang Ho just shrugs, calm. "Someone has to do the job," he replies. "I'm just doing my duty as a correction officer, like anyone else." Not long after, they secure Huang into the execution seat. As he's asked for any final words, he gives a smirk and asks one last time, tauntingly, who's older between him and Gongyu. But Gang Ho remains silent, unfazed, as he begins the countdown. The clock ticks down 3, 2, 1, and just as he presses the button, the video feed cuts off, leaving Gongyu watching, confused, desperate to know what happened. At that moment, Si-Yoon-jo picks up the story, explaining that right as the execution was underway, the entire prison lost power. Officers went into a frenzy, one even asking if it could be Huang's doing. Then, to their horror, they realized the nightmare was real. Huang, somehow, shattered his power suppression device, fried by an EMP pulse, and detonated the chamber, sending everyone into chaos. One guard, mustering his last shred of courage, shouts into his radio, calling for backup. But his voice goes unanswered, and before he can try again, Huang is right behind him. A second later, the guard's face contorts, veins straining, until Huang leans in, whispering, "Pop!" The guard vanishes in a blast, and Gang Ho can only watch in terror as his comrades fall. With a dark smile, Huang strolls over to Gang Ho, guessing he must be the older brother. Despite the horror, Gang Ho stands firm, drawing his dagger and swinging it with a steady hand. But to his shock, his hand dissolves mid-swing, vanishing into thin air. Pain sears through him, and he screams as Huang taunts him, pressing his guess again. Refusing to answer, Gang Ho grabs the dagger with his other hand, lunging once more, even as Huang stands there, cool and detached. In a sudden blast, the officer is no more reduced to nothing, leaving just his hat suspended in midair over a pool of blood. Huang, almost amused, watches the scene unfold, casually speculating if he guessed right about Gang Ho's identity. Back in the present, Gongyu sits, utterly speechless, absorbing the shocking story he's just been told. But Si-Yoon-jo isn't finished. She reveals that the EMP didn't just disable Huang's suppressor, it knocked out every suppression device in the prison. Authorities barely managed to prevent a full-scale breakout, but now countless officers are trapped inside, surrounded by dangerous, unrestrained inmates. When Gongyu asks who triggered the EMP, she admits they still don't know the answer. Despite the weight of the moment, on the very day of his brother's funeral, she requests his help in entering Ruuls to bring an end to the chaos. Gongyu surprises her by agreeing immediately, but he has one condition. Gongyu recalls his friend's code. Heroes save lives. They don't take them. But he also remembers his brother's words that justice belongs to the law and that those who carry it out are called executioners. With both of these principles in mind, Gongyu decides he will enter Ruuls not merely as a hero but as an executioner, bringing justice to those who deserve it. As the prison gates swing open, the chaos inside halts as prisoners catch sight of the figure stepping through. A few reckless inmates charge toward him, but with barely a motion, they're flung aside like insects. In the shadow of the gate, he stands tall, donned in a corrections officer's uniform, the new guardian of Ruuls. The air shifts, and recognition flickers in the prisoners' eyes as they realize who he is. Their curiosity twists quickly into anger, and they surge at him like it's their final chance. Gongyu doesn't budge, ready to face this riot head-on. He balls his fist and with one powerful punch, drops the first inmate cold. Another swing, and more fall around him like toppled statues, leaving limbs scattered across the floor. The remaining prisoners freeze, stunned, finally grasping just how outmatched they are against this force. With the gate closing behind him, Gongyu strides forward, steady and controlled. After a quick mic check, he addresses the crowd of prisoners, who now hang on his every word. Under government order, every floor up to the 5th basement is now under my control. I'm here to fulfill my brother's duty, and judgment will be immediate. And when Gongyu says it, his voice is unwavering, leaving every prisoner certain he means every word. Gongyu is laser-focused, driven to reach the deepest level of Ruuls and finally bring down his brother's killer. It seems the white-haired psycho senses his arrival and is equally eager for a showdown. Meanwhile, the prisoners on the ground floor catch wind of Gongyu's presence and, regaining some bravado, start trash-talking him, daring him to take on everyone there. Gongyu, unfazed, simply reminds them of the lives they've taken, innocent lives lost without remorse. "Why the fuss now?" he challenges, watching as the inmates shift uneasily. The prisoners begin boasting amongst themselves. One smirks, saying he's only taken out 23 people, while others claim lower numbers, defending their rights, as if it somehow lessens their guilt. Amid this noisy crowd stands Gwen Choi, calm and detached, his green hair a distinctive marker. Known as both a dangerous offender and the murderer of 8, Gwen exudes a misplaced confidence, convinced he can slip past Gongyu undetected. He breaks into a sprint, weaving through the mob in a blur of speed, only to meet Gongyu's fist in a single crushing blow. Finally, the rowdy crowd falls silent, now more inclined to listen. Gongyu's voice cuts through, steady and cold. "Here's the deal," he says. "Either you put those suppression devices back on and return to your cells, or you choose to end it here." The chilling finality in his tone sends shivers through the room. Yet, one arrogant inmate scoffs, rallying others, saying they might as well fight since they're already screwed. Why not try their hardest to escape? Gongyu isn't having it. With a dark edge in his voice, he reminds them that he's not here to hand out favors. "Consider this your last mercy," he says, "before I bring you down for good." His words sink in, and the once defiant crew starts to panic, weighing their options, a few already slipping their suppression devices back on, hoping to stall for time. But one inmate, refusing to back down, begins to speak up. With an ominous green glow radiating from him, he screams to grab everyone's attention. Once he has their eyes, he declares they shouldn't fear some random hero from equality, referring to Gongyu's hero association. According to him, if they all band together, Gongyu doesn't stand a chance. He even brags about having taken down a second-tier hero once, claiming they can easily do it again. The crowd, feeling the spark of rebellion, gets riled up, each ready to rush Gongyu for a shot at freedom. Fueling their excitement further, the instigator barks for them not to retreat, spurring the inmates into action. But Gongyu knows this guy all too well. He's heard it all from the warden. Ruculus's threat levels are carefully classified. The ground floor alone houses over 300 hardened criminals, each responsible for multiple lives lost. The first basement holds another 100 convicts, all of whom have endangered entire towns. On the second basement, the stakes rise higher, with over 30 who've terrorized entire cities. Down on the third, 10 prisoners reside, those who made entire nations beg for mercy. And deeper still, on the fourth, there are 5 who pose a threat to entire continents. Gongyu is more than ready to face them all. The fifth basement floor is where the real nightmares are kept, along with Gongyu's arch-nemesis. 2 other criminals sit, each capable of endangering the entire world. The warden reassures him, though, that he might not have to face everyone below. Prisoners on different floors don't exactly get along, and it's not unusual to see them fighting each other to pass the time. In fact, Huang himself is likely having a bit of fun, clearing out those lower floors, giving our hero a twisted head start. But things are different on the ground floor. Here, the prisoners are united under one leader, a notorious criminal named Heilson. With his unique power to shout and enhance the strength of those around him, Heilson is about to stir up some serious trouble. When Gongyu confronts him, he reminds Heilson of the atrocities he's committed, including the attack on a hospital that left 8 dead, among them a second-tier hero named Hayes. Heilson, however, sneers and corrects him, claiming he killed 10, proudly noting that Hayes was pregnant with twins. The look on his face is shameless, disgusting. Gongyu, holding back his rage, radios the warden to ask if Ruculus can handle a bit of roughhousing. Her reply is simple: he's free to go as hard as he needs. With permission granted, Gongyu prepares to bring down the hammer, but Heilson just scoffs, mocking him as a trash hero who only captured Huang after his own team's sacrifice. Then, with a sneer, Heilson vows to send Gongyu straight to where his fallen teammates went. Raising his voice, Heilson screams his empowerment spell, his revolting shout ringing through the air. The prisoners around him feel the surge, wild with newfound strength as they rush at Gongyu in a frenzy. But Gongyu doesn't flinch. He swings his leg, unleashing a crackling wave of dark red energy that tears through the room, wiping out every enemy in its path. When the dust settles, Heilson stands frozen, his face etched with horror as he stares at the remains of his forces, scattered limbs and blood strewn across the floor. Gongyu isn't finished, though. Lifting his leg high, he brings it down hard, sending another shockwave through the room. The floor quakes, and the very walls of Ruculus tremble as the prisoners drop like flies. Elsewhere in the prison, a figure strapped in full criminal gear feels the tremor and smirks. "Gongyu has arrived," he mutters, already anticipating the chaos. Down on the ground floor, it's a day of reckoning for the rioting prisoners, each feeling the wrath of Gongyu's power. As the empowerment spell forces them to charge him again, Gongyu delivers a powerful strike, slicing through them with dark energy. In an instant, they're lifted, cut cleanly in half, suspended mid-air, their bodies split from the waist. The once proud leader, Heilson, stares in disbelief as his own life slips away. Standing among the fallen, Gongyu watches as limbs and bodies drop from above, hitting the ground with final, sickening thuds. Silence descends, broken only by the lifeless remains of those who dared rebel. Yet, there are still two left standing, barely clinging to life, and Gongyu's gaze shifts to them, offering them one final choice. They stand frozen, caught like deer in headlights, unsure of what to do. Finally, the larger one loses his patience and lunges, swinging a fist at Gongyu only to have his head burst like a balloon. That leaves the smaller one, trembling with fear. Surrendering, he decides to take the safer option and put the device back on. Gongyu tosses him the device, and the prisoner, shaking, reaches out. But suddenly, his expression twists into a nasty grin, and he blasts Gongyu with a surge of purple energy. The prisoner laughs maniacally, thinking he's caught Gongyu off guard until his laughter dies as Gongyu stands there, unharmed. Before dealing with the trickster, Gongyu remembers something Tomai from Equality once shared. A villain had boasted that only those who fight up close understand the thrill of crushing an opponent with their bare hands. Fueled by that memory, Gongyu lets the thrill surge, turning the prisoner into dust like he's crushing an egg in his palm. With these pests out of the way, Gongyu continues deeper into the prison. Soon enough, he encounters a familiar face, a twisted criminal he hasn't seen in 3 years. The man's locked in solitary confinement for cannibalism and other vile acts, waiting, it seems, just for Gongyu's arrival. He begins to exchange small talk, but Gongyu cuts straight to the point, telling him to put his suppression device on if he values his life. Instead of complying, the criminal goes into a flashback, proudly recalling the day Equality captured him. That's when Gongyu notices a pot on the floor, packed with what appears to be human flesh. Realization hits, and his expression shifts from shock to horror. The criminal savors the moment, casually explaining how perfectly seasoned human flesh tastes. Anger boils within Gongyu, and he's ready to take the vile man down. But he remembers a moment when Captain Marvel stopped him, reminding him of the hero's code. He'd been forced to swallow his rage and let the criminal walk free. But now, Gongyu's made his intentions clear. If this man doesn't talk, he'll take it as a death wish. The prisoner tries to provoke him, daring Gongyu to ask why he committed such heinous acts. But without a word, Gongyu swings his blade, slicing clean through the man's head. Except it was only an illusion. The man's still standing, alive and laughing. His powers let him engrave his memory into others' minds, ensuring they can't forget him even in death. Unfazed, Gongyu slices the prisoner's hand clean off, remarking that he was aiming for his annoying face and simply missed. Now certain his end is near, the prisoner asks if Gongyu remembers the people he's cut down along the way. Gongyu dismisses him, saying those scumbags aren't worth remembering. In a final, desperate move, the prisoner conjures illusions of Gongyu's fallen companions, each looking innocent and real. But Gongyu sees right through it, slicing through the illusions without hesitation. Shocked, the prisoner watches as Gongyu wipes away his companions' faces without flinching. Coldly, Gongyu states they were only illusions, then slices the prisoner in two, dropping his lifeless form to the ground. Before leaving, Gongyu makes it clear he's no longer the hero he once was. He's taken on the role of executioner. As the man takes his last breaths, he whispers that Gongyu has become something else entirely, not the hero he faced before, but a monster no different than Huang himself. Those parting words strike a nerve with Gongyu, though we don't get to see his full reaction. The scene cuts back to the depths of the prison, where Huang, growing restless, is goading a nearby prisoner, urging her to put up a decent fight. He's clearly tired of waiting for Gongyu and muses about heading up to meet him if no one here proves entertaining. Meanwhile, outside the prison, 3 figures stand on a high hill, watching the chaos unfold from afar. The leader of the trio, a woman clutching an iPad, is completely absorbed in monitoring Gangyu's progress. She seems thrilled by his daring moves, even calling him husband under her breath. Her companions look at each other, bewildered, and ask what she's talking about. Without a beat, she grins, stating that Gangyu is definitely going to be her hubby. The bigger guy beside her, named Canis, raises a brow and reminds her that she'd once been smitten with Huang, even planning to make him her husband. Why the sudden switch? The other woman, Gato, jumps in, adding that the whole point of launching the EMP was to free Huang, so Gangyu should be seen as an enemy, just an obstacle in their way. But Sinka, the leader, shrugs it off, claiming Gangyu's no hero now he's become a butcher. Canis rolls his eyes and suggests she settle on one guy because sailing on two boats isn't exactly ethical. Torn between the two, Sinka finally decides to go with whoever survives, thrilled at the thought of a showdown between her two choices. Back inside the prison, the warden checks in with Gangyu, giving him a nod of approval for handling the ground floor so quickly. She warns him that the inmates only get stronger the deeper he goes and suggests he rest before heading down. Gangyu waves off the idea, requesting she simply open the next door. She agrees but asks a favor first. She's received reports from officers trapped on the second basement level and pleads with him to save them. They have families waiting for them. Staying focused, Gangyu asks for a count of the remaining officers on each floor. She admits she's unsure, as all communication below the first basement has been lost, except for a faint link to the 5th floor. Meanwhile, down in the depths, a lone soldier drags himself along the floor, his legs gone. It's clear that Huang is taking his time, deliberately going through each prisoner, almost as if he's clearing a path for Gangyu to come face him. After taking in the warden's update, Gangyu nods and makes his way to the entrance of the first basement. With her approval, the control room gives the go-ahead, and the door groans open. Before he steps inside, she offers him one last warning, urging him to watch his back since the prisoners here are far from average. As soon as he steps into the first basement, Gangyu understands why. The prisoners unleash a barrage of attacks, laughing and taunting as they hurl every weapon they have. It's a chaotic welcome, but Gangyu's stance is steady, undeterred as he prepares to face them head-on. As Gangyu's relentless assault leaves bodies strewn across the floor, a woman watching from the sidelines is struck with horror, but she doesn't have a moment to process it, as a hulking prisoner closes in on her, gripping her by the throat and hoisting her off the ground. With a smug grin, he taunts her, saying he's been waiting ages to give her the beating of a lifetime. Calling out to his buddies, he shouts that he's finally captured their long-awaited chicken. But his taunt falls on dead ears. Gangyu's already taken them all out, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Realizing he's alone, the prisoner's smugness fades, replaced by stunned silence. When he glances up, he sees Gangyu hurtling down, landing a powerful punch that shatters both the prisoner and the ground beneath them. The impact sends shockwaves through the room, even knocking the woman to her knees. Finished with the prisoner, Gangyu turns to her and firmly instructs her to leave when the next door opens. This place, after all, is no haven. His steely gaze sends a chill down her spine, and she stammers a quick reply. As he turns to move forward, she reminds him about Tomoki, a notorious prisoner captured by Hiro Tomai, currently held in isolation on the first basement floor. Gangyu just nods, dismissing her concern as he presses on. Down in the isolation cells, the sounds of chaos echo, stirring the prisoners within. One suggests that maybe a breakout is underway, only for Tomoki to stroll in, mocking their cluelessness. Standing on a fallen guard's body, she scoffs, pointing out that if the prisoners were truly trying to escape, they wouldn't be making such a racket. She throws a jab at her cellmates, mocking their lack of intellect, saying that's exactly why they're here and prison brains are apparently a rare commodity. Her smugness doesn't sit well with a towering, muscle-bound prisoner who steps forward, glaring at her and asking if she's looking for trouble. Tomoki smirks and, with biting confidence, taunts him, questioning if he even has the guts to lay a finger on her. She sneers, reminding them that while they may have only targeted helpless civilians, she's taken down superpowered foes by the dozens. She's even lost count. The big guy's had enough. He hasn't faced superpowered foes before, but he's sure he's about to now. Before he can blink, though, Tomoki cuts him down with a single swipe of her clawed hand, severing him in two. Calmly, She looks at what remains of him and asks if he's got any more to say about killing. The other prisoners, stunned, stare at her in awe as she lectures them. She recalls her past as a hero, a time when she saved countless civilians and learned firsthand how to combat superpowered enemies. She offers them a proposition: join her, and she'll teach them the art of taking down those with powers, even promising to help them take on Gangyu himself, as she knows every inch of his abilities. Her mention of inside knowledge on Gangyu's powers excites her cellmates, who eagerly ask how she's privy to such information. Smiling, she reminds them of her long tenure as a hero, which exposed her to detailed knowledge about most heroes. One of the prisoners, skeptical, reminds her that she was only a third-tier hero, while Gangyu sits at the top in the League of Equality. How, then, does she expect to defeat him? That's when Tomoki drops a bombshell. She recalls that when Captain Marvel took over Equality, she overhauled the hero system. First, she redefined heroism, banning heroes from killing villains. Then, she made it mandatory for heroes to train together in teams. Lastly, she abolished the tier ranking system that once divided heroes into 5 levels, leveling the playing field entirely. With the tier system removed in the league, there's no official gauge of Gangyu's strength, leaving some uncertain if he's as powerful as his reputation suggests. Rumors add fuel to the fire, hinting that Gangyu's connection to the League could have more to do with an alleged romance with Captain Marvel than his heroics. This idea catches on with one thug, who admits he's never seen Gangyu fight, though he points out that it took him no time at all to clear the ground floor, meaning he must be at least second tier in strength. The woman dismisses his logic, rolling her eyes, saying that those ground floor prisoners were weaklings. She goads the group further, reminding them that they've each claimed thousands of lives, and if the ground floor inmates were any indication, these isolation cell prisoners are leagues above. She points to Speech, who proudly boasts the highest kill count in the room, a staggering total near 6,500 people. She assures them Gangyu isn't weak, but insists she knows how to exploit his weaknesses. Teaming up to confront him, she suggests, is their best and only option. Speech, dubious, speaks up, asking if she's certain about her plan. She doesn't mince words, reminding him they don't have much choice. Death is coming for them either way, so hesitation isn't an option. With this grim reminder, the goons raise their hands, committing to the plan. Speech hesitates for a moment but ultimately agrees, setting his sights on Gangyu. As they strategize, let's take a moment to understand these powers in their world. Superpowers, or abilities, come in 3 categories: physical, which enhance or transform the user's body; creation, which allows one to generate materials or objects from thin air; and special, a broad category covering all unique abilities that don't fall into the other 2. Back in the cell, a hush falls over the thugs as Gangyu appears at the entrance, standing before them with an imposing presence. Speech uses a physical-type power known as brainwave communication to link their minds, allowing them to strategize telepathically. As they connect, the woman mentions that Gangyu's abilities are physical type, just like her own, which makes her confident that she's familiar with his limitations. Gangyu steps into the room, addressing the group with a simple ultimatum: put on their suppression devices or face death. He gets no reply, only a surprise attack that barely affects him. The woman expected this, knowing that Gangyu rarely dodges attacks. She's stationed prisoners with creation and special type abilities behind a fortified door, ready to launch an assault from a distance. A rainbow of powers explodes through the room as every thug hurls their abilities at him. Speech watches in amazement as Gangyu doesn't flinch or attempt to block, just as the woman predicted. She explains why. Gangyu doesn't see their attacks as threats and doesn't feel the need to dodge, but she has a twist in mind. Hidden in the shadows, several prisoners take advantage of Gangyu's calm stance, placing power suppression devices all over him from head to toe. Speech, having followed her instructions, had gathered these devices from the guards' bodies. He's skeptical of their effectiveness, though, noting that these devices were meant to restrain only the lower-level prisoners. The woman reassures him, saying that stacking 10 devices should easily hold a second-tier hero, and they've strapped 20 onto Gangyu for good measure. Thinking they've won, the thugs begin to celebrate, but their joy is short-lived. Gangyu, unbothered, peels off the devices like they're nothing more than pesky stickers, throwing them to the ground. The woman's face twists in shock as Gangyu rips through the devices effortlessly, proving he's leagues above even a first-tier hero. Sensing the tables turning, She quickly commands the group to move to their backup plan, telling him to halt, claiming they've taken guards hostage. Before her threat even lands, Gang Yu's dark red energy crackles with a flick of his finger, leaving the guards unharmed but reducing the thugs to piles of blood and flesh. This brutal display reveals a second flaw in her plan, assuming Gang Yu's abilities were only physical. As she and her remaining allies cower in horror, the few thugs left question if they should surrender. One by one, the prisoners hiding behind fortified doors hesitantly offer to put on their suppression devices. But Gang Yu's cold expression doesn't soften. His crackling energy surges again, sweeping through the room and finishing off everyone still hiding. This devastating final attack marks the third oversight in the woman's plan, underestimating the gap between her group's abilities and Gang Yu's strength. Now certain he's in serious trouble, Speech turns to the woman, shouting in frustration, asking what went wrong and if she has a backup plan to salvage the mess she's led them into. Thanks for watching, guys. Comment Flamingo and subscribe for the next part.